Welcome to a new episode of the James Kennedy Podcast. How the hell are you guys doing? There's been a brief disturbance in the force this past week as I've been a little bit late getting these episodes out because I have been finishing my book. I know I've been talking about this thing for fucking ages now, but the bad boy is done. I bring good news. The thing is finally done. Man, I'm so chuffed. It's been sent, submitted, signed, sealed, and delivered to the publishers. It is done, baby. And I'm really chuffed with how it's turned out. I mean, it's turned into a very different book from what it started out as. There's loads of stuff in there to do with, well, I'm not going to even tell you. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to wait and see. And you know what? I'm not even going to moan about the journey of writing the thing because I've done that too many times now. To this episode, I'm just going to get straight down to business and bring on the guest. This week, it's a music industry special. As you know, this podcast tends to fluctuate between my connection to the music industry and life as a musician, and also my personal interests in politics and philosophy and science and health and all that good stuff. This week, we got a deep dive into the music industry, and we've got the best man to give us the lowdown of what we got to do as musicians to navigate the murky underbelly of the music industry in 2024. If you're in a band, if you're a musician, or you've got some independent releases coming up, or you're trying to get signed, or you're trying to book some shows, you don't know what the best thing to do for your career is at this point, listen on, because I got the man with the answers. Because we are joined today by the one and only Mr. Andy Farrow. For the past 30 years, Andy has been a record label owner, artist, manager, music publisher, tour booker, and much, much more that we're going to get into. He is the top dog at the mighty Northern Music Company, who currently represent the awesome Opeth and Devin Townsend, amongst tons of others. This man knows his stuff, and I'm super excited to pick his brains on your behalf about a whole range of topics. So let's get down to it and welcome him onto the show. Mr. Andy Farrow, sir, thank you so much for doing this, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. Good to speak with you.
Oh, it's good to have you with us, man. We appreciate it. To start with, I mean, obviously, I've been in bands and stuff for 20 years. I mean, you know, me and anyone like me knows exactly all about who Mr. Andy Farrow is. But for those listeners who don't, could you give us a brief background on, you know, who you are, what you do, what you've done, and what's going on?
Yeah, so I have a holding company called Northern Music Group, which encompasses a management company, Northern Music Co., record company, Graphite Records, publishing company, AMF Music, booking agency, NMC Live, merch company, O-Merch that I co-own with Opeth. So I've been kind of managing bands professionally since 1988.
Wow.
First band I got a major deal with Warner's for. Prior to that, I was kind of involved with the anarcho-punk scene. So over the years, as managing bands, I've kind of learned every aspect of the business, and then opportunities came along to, you know, have a record label. So I had a band on V2, and they were like, "Oh, you're Mr. Rock. Do you want to have a record label?" So I said, "Yeah." With publishing, I was managing Oceanside. I got them a big Orange mobile phone advert, and Cobalt again said, "You're Mr. Rock. Do you want a publishing company?" So kind of moving along, and then, you know, obviously prior to the pandemic, it became pretty evident that live was the big earner. And so I thought, you know, looking at booking agencies, much easier making money booking than managing bands. So set up the booking agency, and with the merch, again, Opeth, massive merchandising bands. So we thought we would, with the sales they do, we will be able to get the scope to get good prices. So, you know, set up a kind of, management, so artist-owned company. And, you know, that's done pretty well. So it's not a 360 company where you have to sign to everything. It just means that if, for example, you know, I publish you and I can't get you a record deal, I might better put the record out. So you can tap into whatever you want to use, really.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the term 360 has a different connotation these days, doesn't it, with a certain type of record deal? But that's not what you're doing over there. You've just got a massive kind of umbrella operation that kind of houses all of these different elements that people can tap into if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one-stop shop if you want it, or you can just go into sections. But, you know, I will say, actually, releasing records, whilst I do fight labels and really push them, you know, releasing records is definitely a tough thing. The amount of work that goes into it, really, for what you get back or what you have to go through, especially if you're still doing physical, it's you Yeah.
Well, you've been sort of in the game now during the great change of the music industry. So you were kicking it in the old world, and now you're still kicking it in the new world. What's your thoughts on the transition? Is it better now for bands or labels? Is it harder, or is it just different?
Well, I think for labels are making money, huge amount of money on catalogs. So firstly, it was a case of when the CD came in, the Beatles and Pink Floyd, let's issue it on CD. So with all the new formats, so record labels making more majors, this is more money than ever before. And this is mainly down to catalog. You got to remember that, 98%, well, 98.5% of bands that sign fail or they don't recoup and are dropped. So very much about catalog. As far as for bands, I personally think, when the internet came along and it was all like file sharing and stuff and people worrying about bootlegging. But, to be honest, I think it's easier for bands now to establish an audience because people have got access to the music. When I started, you would buy a magazine and read about a band, and then you go to the shop and buy it. You already had a view about what they sounded like, whereas it's very accessible now. The only thing is that now there's not the gatekeepers. Anybody can put stuff out. So there's so much music, and then there's a situation of younger people, do they actually want to pay for music? If you talk to young kids, they're like, well, they expect it for nothing. And even, having a publishing company sometimes with soundtracks, they say, oh, well, we haven't got much money. It's as though music doesn't matter. Everything's spent on the other side. So overall, for me, different kind of deals. I think it's good now, and the kind of deals that I've got for my bands, where they're license deals and they get their masters back, is good. But and even when you talk about streaming, yes, streaming is not good when you've got record label distribute everybody taking cuts. But when you go direct to the market, if you've got your catalog coming back, you can earn a lot of money streaming.
100%.
I mean, admittedly, Spotify could pay more, but the reality is releasing records, doing physical, getting returns, declining retail is difficult. So the thing with streaming is that you can reach an audience. I mean, it's all kind of controlled, but it's, I mean, I'd say that deals these days are better. In the 60s, they had life of copyright publishing deals. So I think deal-wise, are better for bands. I mean, obviously they haven't achieved the huge sales they used to, but I do think if you're clever or you've got a manager who knows what you're doing, you can certainly make as much money.
Yeah, I think the capacity is there. I mean, I'm an independent artist. My first album came out when it was 2002. Played everything, produced it myself, put it out, and did quite well with that one. So I just kind of followed that model, really. But that was kind of before Facebook. I mean, it was kind of before the great transition, really. It was just kind of starting. So it was all I've ever known, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since, really. I set up my own publishing company just to represent my own catalog, which is now sub-published by, you mentioned Cobalt, sub-published by those guys. But in terms of making and distributing the record, I've kind of experimented with all the things that have come and gone over the years, and it's kind of all I know now. So it's interesting when I speak to people with experience from the other side of the industry, the more traditional way of releasing things, I suppose. It kind of sounds like a foreign world to me, because I'm a big evangelist as an independent artist who, as exactly as you said, through COVID, I was making a few $100 a month from Spotify, which is not Ed Sheeran money, but it's more than I was making selling fucking CDs, So I think there is a lot to say for the new model for people who are sort of willing and able to sort of delve into managing those aspects of it themselves. But the hardest thing, I think, is being heard above the noise, which is what you alluded to. There's so much fucking stuff now. How does anyone, with a deal or without, get heard above the noise, But I mean, before social media and self-distribution, that wasn't even an option. So I think it probably is better now.
Well, I think in the rock metal world, it's always about touring and building a fan base.
Right.
Because you get limited radio and TV. And even when you're looking at streaming, within that genre, it's still very behind pop and hip hop. So, when you're talking about, again, going about DIY, I do believe in record labels, because I think the problem when you do it yourself is you haven't got a marketing reach. For example, in Germany, If you don't advertise in a magazine, they won't cover you.
Right.
That is how it works. Now, the reality is when I started, press was very, very important. And, you would fly journalists all over the place. Does having a good review or an advert sell records these days? Not totally, but, it can give you the hype and everything. So I think, that whole DIY model, you can get to market, but it's about what you're willing to give up. So if you went to a record label and you said, all right, you'll do a license deal, means you get the master back. Because sometimes the amount of money they give you, you might have spent more on the master. And there are also acts, when you just mentioned Spotify versus physical, who do vinyl, and they could sell 2,000 vinyl direct to their fan and make enough money to live on that way. But that is looking at the model as just earning money. I think, if you really want a career, you have to look internationally.
Right.
And, there's a lot of acts that have kind of only sold in one country and might have been big in that country and been dropped because the amount that's been spent on them, they need a bigger audience, international audience.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, well, I've certainly felt that myself. I mean, I'm able to make and put the record out, which is fucking amazing. Couldn't have done that in the 70s, But yeah, I mean, touring, putting on your own tours and stuff like that, that's, it very, very, very difficult if you're just doing it yourself. You don't have the infrastructure or the know-how or the contacts or anything like that. And scalability is so hard as well. I mean, you're essentially, by relying on getting picked up by a playlist or an algorithm or something, you're essentially just rolling the dice and hoping for the best, rather than building a tangible long-term career for yourself with a manager or a label or something like that. So I mean, I've had a few people on the podcast, like Simon Raymond was on from Bella Union, and Brian Slago from Metal Blade, and they all said, it's great that you can start yourself off as an independent artist that way, but in order to think long-term and build something, you still need the industry. So it's kind of an interesting merging now of the two models, I think.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you've had a lot of labels doing artist services, and with some of my bigger acts, we were offered these deals. And I did say to one of them, well, what about me? And they were like, well, we'll give you X amount of money, because it's a massive job for a manager. So if you do a label services deal, you really need to be with the right kind of artist that is very business-like as well, because some acts that I deal with are kind of, they would still want the mysteriousness, and so they don't embrace digital assets and being available. So, again, as a musician or an artist, I think it's important to have an understanding about how to sell yourself, because I do tell acts, no matter how good your album is, it will not sell itself these days.
Yeah.
And, you need to promote. And I mean, there's countless releases. I mean, I'm signed up with the official charts company, so I can see what every band has sold. And when you cut all the hype away, they can have Kerrang covers, etc. And, the sales are small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the other thing is, it's, again, even when you're in the system, if you've not got a manager fighting, the labels are putting so much out that some of them are, they go through the system, they go out. But also running a label, I know how difficult it is.
Right.
When you've done loads of work and you're like, well, we sold 450 albums physical. And for the amount of effort that goes in, that's not very much. But if you set up things like pre-orders, direct-to-consumer campaigns, doing in-stores, all that, there are ways that you can get your sales up.
Right.
But I don't find a lot of labels do a lot of those things. I mean, obviously, Earache did it with Skin Dread, where they do the in-stores, but then you've got clashes with promoters who don't like underplays.
Yeah.
So it's like a constant thing, the whole chicken and the egg. It used to be release the record, then you go on tour. Now, if I want to get a band in charts, I release the record, I tour that week, I use Lightning Strike app for on the road sales, doing stores, got your pre-orders. But the whole model has changed. And when people say, well, what does it mean with a chart position? But it does give you a bit of hype with the internet. You can say you're number one in Finland. It's only 1,500 sales, but it's still number one.
Yeah. It's mental, isn't it, that you can have 1,500 sales and be number one now,
Yeah. So, I was looking at the charts today. I mean, take that, where, 6 figures at number one. I haven't seen a band, and this is the midweek. A band, you can go top 10 at sort of 6,000-7,000 in the right month.
Yeah.
So it's changed. It has changed a lot. The actual figures of what acts sell.
Well, you said it's not all about the money, and it's a great point, because it's not, is it? I mean, if any of us were doing this for the money, we probably would have given up a long time ago, especially musicians, you know what I mean? But I mean, in this day and age where we're mostly funding things independently by ourselves, these aspects, the commerciability and the hype factor and all that sort of stuff, anything that does shift units does make a difference, because, we do need to fucking eat, and we do need to keep the show on the road, and that costs a lot of money,
Yeah, but one side, when you're an artist, you have to look at your income stream. So, early bands, like when I took over Paradise Lost, they were on a small independent label, and, Roadrunner wanted to sign the band, but Roadrunner wanted merchandise and publishing for a small advance. So we didn't go for that. So with Music for Nations, they didn't want publishing and merch. So I did separate publishing and merch deals, and that gave enough money for the band. We set up a company, and then they have a salary. So it's about looking at income streams, which is where certain record companies that are offering deals where they wanted to control web stores and things like that, it's very tough. So what they're doing is, in the old days, people would sign on, get doll, and they go on tour, and somebody would say, "Oh, you're in Kerrang this week. We're not giving you the doll." But you've got to allow a band the freedom to become a business, to sustain themselves, because if they have to work, they can't tour. If they're not available, they can't do promo. And if a label or somebody comes in and squeezes all of those areas, then they don't, get it. I mean, it's like, when you look at publishing, if a songwriter should be in PRS, bands don't fill out the PRS live income sheets. They're losing loads of money. There's stuff you can do. The other thing is knowing your market, T-shirts, all that sort of thing. And, looking at yourself like a cottage industry. So it's important that the labels don't try and get it. I understand when they used to give bands tour support that they want to earn on some other things. But I think if they're not actively bringing something to the table, why should they control it?
100%. And do you feel the power of social media has waned? I personally feel that. I think there was a kind of gold rush period where how many followers you had was a kind of a metric as to how well you were doing. And then people started buying followers and buying comments and doing, and all this bullshit.
Well, there is that. But I can say as a manager, when somebody wants a support slot, you can tell my age then, because I look at Facebook, whereas new bands, they go, "Oh, what's your face? Oh, no, we're just on Insta." And then it's like, they're so cool, there's just pictures, there's not even music there. That's how it used to do. I'm like, right, okay, that's the picture. So no, I still think people look at analytics where, So when you're on about social media, but so maybe people might start looking at Spotify streams. But what I see in the metal rock area, certainly with bands I publish, some of them have got tiny streams, but they pull a load of tickets, and they also sell a lot of T-shirts. Right. So social media is still there, but obviously the new thing now is TikTok. So I think like major labels are looking at catalog and looking at things that are reacting at TikTok. And working in the rock metal area, we're very behind on TikTok. Yeah. And it's about how you tap into that. But what I have seen having a publishing company is all of a sudden some act I publish is, hardly earns anything. And then because something's happened on TikTok, it's generated. So I think, things move. As I said, Facebook, then it was Instagram, Twitter, I didn't fully get myself, but it is. I think, people still look at it because you want to see. In the old days, you would just blag somebody and say, we can bring 20 people.
Right.
The data is there now. I can look up record sales in America here, ticket sales you can get. And the art of the blag is gone now because the data's
Well, that's good to know, because social media is rife with it. You see a band that you've never heard of, and you're like, man, how the fuck have these guys got 2 million followers? I've never heard of them. And then you're like, you look at the engagements and it all, the comments and all clearly paid for. It's the same comment over and over again.
No. I mean, I've seen bands where I've been like, oh, that is huge. Kind of extreme bands. But what I would like to do is, if I could tap into market the way that other businesses do, on social media, where you might have been looking at something and then, it really is like they're listening
Yes.
to you. And then you with all these things and you haven't even bought something and then they're still coming back and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I think the thing also with social media, with Facebook, you only reach X amount of percentage of people, which, again, when it comes to marketing, certainly from a live point of view, if you've got a 40 plus audience, I would push you to get a promoter to, look at posters, look at flyers, not just rely with online, because there are some people that don't live on their phones or on computers that are doing manual jobs and are out and about or whatever. And, sometimes that, again, is about knowing your audience and how to engage with them and aggregate them.
Well, I learned a very important lesson in the lockdown when I released my album. I've spoken about this in the podcast before. The album Make Anger Great Again. It came out a month before Trump was going for a second election. And I thought I was being very satirical and clever, by releasing a political kind of punk rock album that was hijacking the Make America Great Again sort of slogan, because it was kind of like the opposite messaging to that. It was all about rising up against the power, against the system and stuff. And I felt like I had everything in place because for a few years prior to that, I'd just been building up my social media following exclusively because I'm 100% independent. So I don't have access to the editors of all the big mags and stuff like that. So I threw all my eggs into the social media basket. I had everything lined up. My audience was great. They're very engaged and supportive. I'd done several successful crowdfunding campaigns and everything. It was all going great. So everything was lined up ready for this album to come out. And then one day after the first video came out, YouTube took it down because they said it was politically insightful. Facebook revoked my advertising rights, so I couldn't do any boosted posts or ads or anything like that because for the same reasons. They said it was politically insightful. I was demonetized on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and I effectively shadow banned. Like nobody has seen anything I posted on social media ever since then. And that was a massive wake-up call for me because I thought I had it going on, but completely unbeknown to myself was that like at any moment in time, by just using social media, someone else can just flick the off switch and it's game over for you, which they did with me, or an algorithm can get your hashtag mixed up with the far right. And then, they're going to just make sure that you just get back page and no one sees anything you post ever again, which is where I've been. So I learned a lot. I learned that like, you don't really have control over ultimately who gets to see your stuff on those platforms. And also you don't own any of it, like all those contacts I only have access to through those platforms, which I now no longer do, Yeah,
you don't own it, but one thing that, people are doing now that was done in the old days is mailing lists.
Yes.
So obviously when GDP came in, everybody lost a lot of data and stuff, but that is starting to come back in marketing.
Right.
Because like you say, you've got all these multimillionaires controlling platforms. They can shut you down and, depending where you got your database, I don't know, Google, they still will have a control. But this is an area that I've seen independent acts, they're releasing themselves that are really engaging with emails instead of just ads.
Right.
And, if you got your database there, you could say, look, you've signed up, so I'm going to let you know early when we're going on tour or we're going to give you a free song. So you could have done that.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't do that. No, I mean, I have got a mailing list of several thousands, but I barely use it again because I was sticking with what was working. I was thinking, this social media game is working.
But in the old days, we would literally have handwritten lists, with people's details, and then GDP thing came in, and it was very difficult losing a lot. But I just think that is. Again, you can refresh your database. You're not reliant on platforms changing or whatever they're bringing in, and you've got your people there. And I think, look at artists like Fish. Again, he, from Marillion, he didn't even opt in to have chart-registered albums, and, he sold direct to his fans, and that is a way you can engage.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And it's almost kind of going back to the old school a bit, isn't it? Because I've been considering actually, instead of doing Facebook ads and Facebook events, because no one fucking comes to that. They might click on it, but they live in Australia. They're not coming. I've actually started resorting to flyering again, with QR codes in the back and just, old school, I don't know, Benji from Skin Dread always carries flyers on him when he's in the supermarket and stuff, So I think there is definitely still more of a place for that now, actually, with these.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole flyering, I mean, I've always done that with releases where bands have got a strong fan base because they want to be part of the band's success. So you create your own street teams, which is what labels like Roadrunner used to do, and you just get just say, right, can you put them in coffee shops or what have you, and then take a picture and you put them on a guest list or give them a T-shirt. Right. And I think that does work, definitely. And, a thing that I used to do a lot of was stickers, but, resulted in a few local councils getting in touch about, graffiti and stuff. But, I think, a mixture of old school things and modern is the way forward, but it really is, as an artist, is to know who your audience is and not oversell, but give them and keep them engaged, but give them something for being engaged, so that it's not like you're selling absolutely everything.
Yeah, great point. So what does a band do then? So let's say that they've got their head switched on, they've got good business acumen, and they've done an EP, they've done their first release or whatever, they're hitting the local circuit. How does a band go from that level to working with, Andy Farrow or Northern Music Company or, a label similar to their genre or whatever? How do they go from doing it all in-house and, getting things going, but moving up the ladder then to that next run where they're starting to get some people on board that can actually help them build and steer a long-term career for themselves?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that, in the old days, it was very much, there would be buzz on certain bands in areas and record labels would venture out. But obviously, with the internet now, record labels A&R people are they're seeing what's buzzing on the internet. So, for example, I have my publishing company, AMF Music, so anything that's hot, I move on it. Like Green Lung is a band I could see there was a very good buzz on them. They're on an underground label, so I met with them. I helped them get 5 offers.
Wow.
And, they're selling out. The record charted. Another band, As December Falls, I set them up a distro deal. They went to number 11. So, sometimes I might have a lawyer or somebody approaches me. So on the back of some of the bands that I publish that I've helped career-wise, because I try and be proactive, whether that's getting them gigs, getting them a record deal, because that's what brings in publishing income, whether it's mechanicals or performance income and syncs. So, it's generally, you can see what is happening there, or people generally, they just talk and say, have you heard this? Or for me, it's a case of, so if some managers come to me or bands on publishing, or if they come on management and I say, look, I don't want to manage any more bands, but I'll do publishing and give you certain management services. So how do they get on the radar? It's not difficult to find email addresses. You got to understand, when I started out, you literally sent a cassette to EMI Records, Manchester Square, London W1. Yeah. That was it. And then you kind of developed there, you got a name, there was not even mobile phones. I mean, this was just a total different time that, a bit of research to target the correct people. I get people sending me rap and I'm like, well, if you'd have researched or stuff that I wouldn't know anything about. So again, research and look, and I think if you're a band, is maybe look at a band you like and think, oh, that label or that manager or that agent's done well, and just do some research. But how do they do it? I think that they get off their butts, basically, do a bit of research and find people. And, if you believe in yourself, again, it's a fine line between badgering people and then knocking on the door and reminding them.
Yeah.
Because, I've had bands in the past where they might have come to me and I didn't get off my butt to go see them and they've done well. But that's why if there's anything I'm interested, but again, it's also about, that fine line between annoying and just saying, oh, have you had a listen yet? So for me, and so it like, so if I get a band for publishing and I'm going to help them get a deal, I just go to all my contacts, and then even if nobody bites, I do get irritated and think, right, I'm going to put it out myself and show you. It was kind of a bit like with Wild Arts. I was managing them, and certain labels turned them down, and we got to #9 in the charts, and I went like that to the label.
How the fuck could anybody turn the Wild Hearts down, for Christ's sake? I mean, Ginger Wild Hearts are fucking genius, man. Well, that kind of segues into something I wanted to ask you about the subject of luck. How important is luck? Because you mentioned at the start, like, it was 98.5% of bands are not going to recoup. They're going to get dropped. They're going to get the big deal and then fizzle away. And God knows we've seen tons of them. Certainly in my lifetime, I've seen loads of my friends get signed to major deals, get loads of money thrown at them, and then the next year they're back fucking, on the building site or whatever. Yeah. And I've also got loads of friends who work really, really fucking hard. They got great fucking music. They do all the things that the rule book says you're supposed to do, like network and be professional and be nice and turn up and work your ass off. They do all that stuff and they got amazing music, but they just cannot catch a fucking break. So do you think that luck is the missing ingredient between the 98.5% of people that can't catch a break and, that 1.5% that do, and also the ones that manage to actually stay there after catching the lucky break? Because I think that's another element as well.
Well, luck, I mean, it depends. I mean, obviously an element of luck in anything, but I think, again, timing is important. So, when a new metal scene came along, so many people got signed, and there were so many also runs, and then there were bands who were lumped in with new metal, and they all sound different. The punk days, you look at what majors signed. They signed loads when U2 broke through, everybody was after stuff. So I think the thing is, you've got to, the problem is with the music industry is very conservative, especially in America, because if you don't fit into that square box, the hole, and you're a bit different, it's like, how do they categorize it? Because even radio and everything's like that. And you get the odd band that kind of breaks through by being different, and I always have a situation where bands go, oh, well, we're not editing the song. Tool don't have to. I'm going, well, Tool are Tool, but generally you can't do a 9-minute video. So how do you get through? I mean, again, my thing always comes back down to fan base. Because, in the old days, I started out with anarcho-punk stuff, and then, bands, New Model Army, Southern Death, all of these bands had huge fan bases, and even Marillion on the prog, the record labels could not turn them down. So you are proving that people want to see you, It's like, I'm the agent, publisher, and record label for a band called Ferocious Dog, who sold out Rock City, unsigned. That's 1,800, 2,000 people. Yeah. And when it comes to the business, people are, who is this band? And then, I've sold like 9,000 albums here, but it's still probably, to the music industry, they might go, oh, no, And again, so my brother's involved with the Levelers, who are another band that built up a massive following.
I know those guys.
The business didn't like them. I know you did your thing with Dan, but I'm talking about going back ages ago. They were never the darlings of the NME, but they got so big. And I was at that Glastonbury with the biggest audience that, the industry can't ignore you. So if you're saying, bands, they have good songs and stuff like that, but, it's got to be about your team as well.
Right.
So not just a manager, the agent, you as a band or as a writer have really got to play your part. And I do think with the internet and everything these days, you've got so many tools at your hands, but not all acts use it. But there is an element of luck. The other thing is, the right place at the right time.
100%. Yeah. Well, the Levelers are a great example. I mean, I had Mark Chadwick on the podcast, and we were talking about this, about how their journey has unfolded. And they've just always stuck to their guns. They've always been 100% authentic to who they are and their message and their music. And they speak to their people, and they've not really given a fuck about anything else. They certainly haven't bent over backwards for the industry or cut any corners or tried to change themselves in any way. And I think that is the key to their success, is that authenticity, is just speaking to your audience, harnessing your audience and your tribe, and just fucking doing it DIY style, which is how they do it, And funnily enough, their festival, Beautiful Days, I actually played at with my band last August, and I think Ferocious Dog were on the bill as well. I didn't get to see them. I didn't get to see anybody. Really, I was too busy doing my thing. But another fucking great band, man. And I think, it just speaks to that. It's another testament to that spirit of just focus on the fans. Speak to your audience, do your thing, and focus on who's really important, which is ultimately your audience.
Yeah. No, so what I'm saying, there are acts. You've got acts like Youngblood and stuff that really sort of developed. But I'm just saying, if all else fails and you're not being picked up by the business, is try and develop your
Right.
audience and just build a
Yeah.
fan base. So that's the thing, because the business can't ignore you if you have proved your product people want. Because otherwise, you're at the mercy of whoever's trying to sell your product. So I think if you actually know who your audience is, then you're going to be even in a better position when you sign a record deal
Right.
about how a company with a budget reaches that wider audience and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But it's, yeah, I mean, there is an element of luck, but I don't know. It's about getting in the trenches, I think.
100%. Yeah, no, that's great advice. And what do you think about the future then? Because we're sort of on the precipice of an interesting future now with the arrival of AI. I don't think we're as far down that rabbit hole yet as people might be freaking out about, but certainly we're seeing more and more of it now, AI compositions and things. My personal feeling is that the first thing to go is probably going to be sync music, because that's kind of easy for a computer to replicate. And then we're probably going to see more and more of it doing the production work and studio things. And then eventually, if we're going to go full dystopian, it could actually probably replace, musicians and singers as well. I mean, these are a lot of the theories. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've read about, when you look at the Beatles single, that's come around through the use of AI. I mean, I have this other app, chat, whatever it is, that, technically you don't need a lawyer. You can just put on that. I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, AI should be used for physical type jobs, not creative. Somebody had put, and I don't know, but kids these days are going to have virtual coffees. They're all like playing games or whatever, But I mean, much like bootlegging, everything that went back, can you really take away from actually being at a concert, So on that thing, whether AI is used for concerts, it's interesting when you say about syncs. Yeah, because what happens is they don't want to pay the Rolling Stones, so they're like, "Oh, we want something that sounds like this," and people do library music.
Yep. Yep.
To be honest, having just come through the pandemic, I haven't been focusing, like everything that changed with the music industry. I haven't been getting bogged down in AI, but I think that it's much like everything in life. Some of these advancements are not advancements at all. Whereas, we can do this, which is great. It means I don't need to travel to see you. But I think with technological advancement, you miss some human. It's all about being
Yeah.
human. That's
Yeah.
it. So I haven't thought a lot about it, but my thought is that, once the human element goes on things, it changes. And I'm already seeing this post-pandemic, just the way people work and everything now. It's very different.
How have you seen a change in the industry since the pandemic? Because it's been compounded for us by the fact that we've also had Brexit.
Yeah.
I did a talk in the House of Lords with the Carry On Touring campaign, talking about how it's affected touring and stuff like that in Brexit, since Brexit. But there is that element. We know that it's made it difficult for smaller bands, I think, to tour with the Carnets and the 90-day rule and all that sort of stuff. But also, yeah, I mean, it's compounded by COVID, which I think we're still feeling the effects of now, in a way, the ripples of it. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think, firstly, I'm not a fan of remote working. I have 12 people. Some are remote and some aren't. I think that what has happened is in a lot of businesses, including the tax office, because they needed to get the money in over the pandemic, most people are working at home. And I think some things are slow. And even with record labels, I do Zooms. People are in their front room or kitchen or wherever they're at. And generally before, say I would, I'm not based in London, I go down to London, say, oh, I'm in town, do you want to meet? Oh, I don't work that day. And
right, yeah,
there is what you call a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday club that happens in the music industry in London. Now, I've never been based in London, so I've always had to travel. And I can understand the expense of London. But what you've got post-pandemic is you've got cities where there's buildings that are empty, and the music industry, the film industry, all of this, they used to have big, expensive buildings. Now, if you're Universal or Sony and people have got used to this remote working, plus young people, they expect it. Hybrid working. Duvet days. I shouldn't have said that, but anyway. There's that move. So personally, I find stuff very slow, but not just the music industry, whether it's the tax office. I mean, we had a situation with a band where during lockdown, they sent us our VAT check, repayment check, for quite a large amount of money, 2 checks. Obviously, no one was in the office. And we've only, after 3 years, managed to get that money back off them because you're ringing out and everything. So I just find everything's very, very slow now, maybe because it's not the interaction. Right. I love Zoom. So now I don't have to travel to a different country to meet a band and everything. But again, much like the advent of email, most of us do emails. But what happens when you just email him? People can't. They might say, oh, how's he writing to me? You lose the human element. The thing about actually meeting someone thinking, oh, I'll get on with this person, and you get a bit more business done. Because I certainly know on email sometimes I come across as very abrupt. And they might think, oh, he's a right twat. But if they mean I'm not as bad. So it's so that's the one thing that post-pandemic. The other thing is what we did to survive, since I got all the companies, was, live was shut down. We did a lot of streaming stuff, but we focused back on the band's catalogue. And our merch company trebled its turnover because people were at home. So, yeah, my only thing post-pandemic is that what I'm worried about is that with technology and stuff, more and more people, there's not that human interaction. And if there's not human interaction, what's going to happen to live eventually is everybody just going to want to just sit and, as you say, young kids having virtual coffees. As far as Brexit goes, I mean, a huge, I started out when there was carnets. But, the real big problem, especially for UK, is a VAT. And the other thing is that getting a credit card machine for merchandise, one that was legally linked up to a bank was one thing. Now they are, but it's not fully linked because, you're supposed to pay VAT in each country. And then you've got these concessions where they do it. So what's happening is you're paying a concession plus VAT. Plus, they're taking the local VAT off, and the old days to be on ECC. So in Norway, you can look at 46% deduction. So if you are a band trying to sell your music, a CD, it's just not worth it. And that is why, Gojira as a band, everybody saying, why a T-shirt's €50. So the other thing with Brexit, as well as the paperwork and making it tough for new bands, the whole VAT in Europe is a minefield, and you need to be an expert. We've got a merch company and we've got a warehouse in Lithuania, but yeah, without going into detail, that the VAT in Europe, and they all have different rates. I'm not sure anybody knows what's going on in the government, really.
I think that's general across the board, I think, including the customs officials and stuff, with the carnets and stuff, and oh, God, yeah, what a fucking bullet to shoot ourselves in the feet with, you know what I mean? But hey, it's here to stay now, so I guess we've got what we've got, I mean,
I did have one of my bands go, oh, well, that's all right, that means we haven't got competition from smaller bands. I.e. that they can't, build a career, which was a bit selfish. But then you are having situations where you see bands are just doing mainland Europe and not the UK, or one or the other sort of thing.
Well, it's not. There's an exemption if you're carrying it, then you're fine. You haven't got to have a carnet or anything like that. So for smaller bands, especially certainly like acoustic trios and shit, they're fucking fine. They can just stick their banjo on their back and their snare drum on their chest, and they're away.
Yeah, but technically, how do small bands survive? Merchandise.
Right.
You can't just print in the UK and go through without duty.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, I was there back in the day, and I mean, me in Paradise Lost, we got fined in Sweden a lot of money and impounded.
Well, oh fuck.
Yeah, many. No, they took us and the boss. Yeah, it was very heavy.
Oh Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so again, it's like we try with Norway, and now carnets. Then French and English don't get on brilliantly. The French didn't stamp it. You go to Germany, you come back, and you could lose the money you put down. I mean, I used to do the carnet myself and go to Leeds Chamber of Commerce and stuff. But yeah, then there was all that inter-country rivalry or whatever.
Right, bullshit. Well, you mentioned Paradise Lost there, and I am aware of the time I can't keep you all day. You mentioned Paradise Lost. Now, I was going to ask you what's coming up at Northern Music Co. If you've got coming up, I know Paradise Lost has got the anniversary of the iconic Icon album. What else is happening?
Yeah, so I mean, with Icon, it was the 30th anniversary. So that was back when they had a record deal. So a lot of their stuff, EMI onwards, we did license deals where we got masters back, and we've seen, how to monetize that. So the idea was to re-record Icon. Some fans are going, how can you do that? But, they don't understand the concept of how deals work. And, the band is doing a tour, but it's kind of unusual venues because we were already touring in Europe. So we had exclusivity clauses for a lot of mainland Europe. But yeah, so they're doing Shepherd's Bush Empire starting on Friday, which is sold out. And then a kind of hometown gig at Bradford St George's Hall, 16th of December. So, we're doing that as a DIY release, and the bands start writing the next record. I've got Devin Townsend Infinity record, remastered, reissued. Catatonia on tour in America. Opeth will be recording a new album in February. So, yeah, a lot of stuff going on with releases. The big thing is, when you're as a management company, is planning your time, but also income streams. So next year, we will not have as many bands out on the road. And if they're not on the road, that brings in income and merch income. So maybe we need to start looking back about anniversaries of albums and then remarketing those albums, bundling with T-shirts, things like that. But it's never a quiet moment as such here.
So interesting, man. So and the fact that you're still fucking crushing it after all these years and after all these changes in the industry. I mean, are you still what keeps you going? Are you still, is it in your blood? Are you still as passionate about it as ever, or is it all now and you can't get out? Or are you still, you wake up every day?
I think one thing is that I need to learn to put boundaries in on how it affects my life, because I've given so much to it that it sort of became my life. But I'm kind of, what's the word? I like to have an award. I'm not driven by money as such, but it's about something being successful, like a sold out gig or going to number one or just something like that, a kind of recognition thing. It's not all about the money, but, one thing, I'm still passionate for it, but it's kind of, so by doing publishing, I'm able to give some of the things I can do as a manager, but without having to deal with a musician's head. If you see what I mean? Yeah. Because as a publisher, I'm going, right, I can help you here, but, I've managed various people, and, creative people can be irrational and it can be very difficult, and everybody talks about musicians' mental health. They rarely talk about a manager's mental health. So I think it's important to, I'm still passionate, but, I need to continually put more boundaries in, I think, on, how far I go with everything.
Amen. Well, on that note of respecting your boundaries and respecting the time you've very generously given us today to enlighten us all, thank you so much for doing this, man. It's been great to meet you. And thank you so much for all the advice and wisdom that you've shared with us all. We really appreciate it. Best wishes with everything coming up next year. And we'll see you out there kicking ass.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, man.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Andy Farrow, ladies and gentlemen, put it together for him. You can find Andy at northernmusic.co.uk. That's his company. I'm not going to give you his personal socials because in respect of his boundaries, it's none of your fucking business. But you can check out all of the amazing bands he works with at the website. And they are also on Facebook at NMC Limited. So check them out. You can find out who they're working with and what tours they got coming up and what releases are happening and all the exciting shit that's going on over there. So join the pages and get involved and show those guys some love, man. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you're a musician or in a band and you're trying to get out there on a circuit, I hope that was informative, because Andy has got just a fucking ton of experience and knowledge and knows what he's talking about. So I hope that'll be a useful chat for you guys in mapping out your next step. And the next step for everyone listening to this right now, please, if you can, subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow, give us a share, give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a fucking comment. Do whatever you got to do. But it all helps to kick the algorithm's ass into gear and help push this thing out there. And it's also nice to just know that people are enjoying it and give me some feedback. Because as Andy said, we're kind of all a little bit atomized at the moment. You know, I don't engage with anybody when I'm doing these podcasts other than on Zoom. So it's nice to know that someone out there gives a flying fuck. So give us a like, give us a share, give us a subscribe. It all helps to, keep this thing moving. I will be back next week with an episode, I promise you. The times of me taking 2 or 3 weeks or longer off in between episodes is now behind us. A thing of the past. I finished the book. It's all about James Kennedy and the Underdogs, new material, new gigs, new adventures, and of course the podcast, new guests every single week. And boy, have I got some great ones in the can already. So do subscribe to the podcast. They'll be coming back at you thick and fast every week. Thanks so much for listening. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. And I will see you next time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Love you loads. Adios.